Welcome back to Witness Stories. This video will be a bit strange even by the standards that life plans seem to create. I mean, do life plans even exist? What I will relate to you next, at least for me, do exist. But their existence is not a simple one. It is as complex as it needs to be to assert the result. A result that comes from your own choices. In fact, it depends on them. Many people can hear their spirit guides speak. Even more people get hints and intuition from that source. But even with this form of input, we must live our own lives and make our own decisions. Until we learn all that we need to in life, we have lessons. Even so, we do have life plans. It may take the form of a selected experience, set of experiences, or perhaps some personal challenges. In all of those possible twists and turns, some interesting synchronicities can result. This story is about a soulmate pair, a true love matchup between a him and her. I just happen to be the him. From my early years, I was predisposed to look for my one true love. I knew from the feelings inside of myself that there was a her. I thought we would, of course, be matched in all possible ways, to be perfect for each other. I have a spiritual exposure and perspective, one that was based on the New Age movement experience. So by my way of thinking, that orientation should match up also in my true love. But in my early relationships, I neglected that idea. Well, some parts of it. I will tell you now, a person should take feelings and intuition seriously and never settle for less than what you hold dear. If I had held to that, I would not have accumulated 2 failed marriages and ended up near to 40 years old still looking for her. But by the end of the second divorce, my biggest mistakes, for me that included loyalty to my spiritual ideals. Those are the lessons taught to me. So let me tell you how all this went down. The family of my youth had a part to play in all of this. You see, one of my brothers saw fit to break my upper front tooth when I was 7 or 8. And later, he broke the matching lower one when I was 11 or 12. After that, my father had a nickname for me, Snaggletooth. My dad meant no harm, but of course, I didn't find that to be very heartwarming. On the other hand, my parents provided a life where I was exposed to all things spiritual and taught me about following your own path, not that of the herd mentality. To their credit, my parents did pay to fix my teeth in high school. There were trade-offs to having that happen, mostly in reference to my search. Another odd thing, which unfortunately also did not help me to find her, but it did add to the synchronicity factor. In my parents' high fascination with many things, they had one for redheads. My mom and dad were not redheads, but they paid a lot of attention to those actresses and women in general with red hair. My parents considered them interesting and unique. That's my impression of that. I did not think this related in any way to me. Only later did I find hair to be significant to my search for love. Only in retrospect did that become significant. So, as it relates to my current wife, who is my true love, well, yes, she is a total ginger redhead. Another fact that comes into play later, my skin, my eyes. While I have a total white ancestry, as you can see, complete with blue eyes, oddly, I tan much better than anyone in my family. Much later, I was told by a medium that my ability to tan was a holdover from a past life. That factor works into this story too, very oddly. So, considering my wife's contribution, she also had internal feelings to find him. She also was exposed to the spiritual by her family. And then she, of course, investigated things on her own. But using what she learned, she had developed the skill to occasionally hear her guides. To this day, I wish I could do that too. In her youth, my wife had the impression that there was a him somewhere in the world. So when she met her first husband-to-be, he had some physical attributes she was predisposed to look for, including a familiar dark ethnic skin color and long hair that would match her expectations and feelings of the past. But he was not me. After the carnage of this first marriage, she was told that her true love, the one, had shared a past life with her, which only lasted a few years after their first meeting. But it was a sad experience, one that left us both missing each other terribly. And yes, he was naturally dark-skinned based on his race at the time. Also note, in this one past life, she was a white, red-headed woman, and I was a Native American. She concluded that the dark skin and hair of the man that she married for her first marriage was one of those attributes that attracted her into the relationship. It kind of imposed itself in her mindset. But many things that should have exhibited were also not in her first marriage. After that, she had many questions, and there were important lessons learned in that relationship. Eventually, the attributes from my past life, including the ability to hold a tan and have blue eyes, would all be affirmed as something significant. But I digress. In that past life, I also had blue eyes, as I said. It was uncommon, but was an indicator of the bloodline of the chief, set them apart from others in the tribe. I do not know how that situation was established. It's just an attribute that I was made aware of. Another attribute that my wife was told, her true love in this current life would have a broken tooth, and that he would have a complementary spiritual background to hers. So, we both had our first marriages and our first divorces. Both of us went on to a second marriage and a second mismatch and set of divorces. It was not until after those second marriages were over that we were single and available in the same time frame. During many periods of time before we finally met, we had lived in places where we could easily have met, but never set eyes on each other. At one point, we even went to the same church. Her second husband even went to the same high school that I did. That second man that she married appeared to be a faithful church goer, but in fact was not really very spiritual. One fact which fooled her was that he had a missing front tooth, plus the blue eyes, which she was expecting. However, he could not even tan well, and in fact was very light-skinned. But by now, she did not feel strongly about the dark skin concept anymore. But a result of various situations, the result was that she did marry him, her second husband. Eventually, my sweetheart learned that there was very little in her second marriage that wasn't a nightmare. It lasted longer than my own second marriage, which is also a huge nightmare to me. I also made many mistakes, ignoring issues I should not have. We both ended our second marriages around the same time, and we both concluded we would never again settle for bad partners. We would only accept someone with a spiritual perspective and a golden heart and the right personalities that supported our own best soul purposes. The looks, facade, social status of that person became much less important to us than anything else. So, how would we meet? My intuition said to maybe try looking at personal in advertisements, the personals in magazines of the time. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have the internet. We only had papers. And in that search, look for a dedication to similar spirituality. As for my wife's effort, having developed the skill to hear them, her guides said, put in a personal ad to select and they selected a community newspaper for that, and to have faith. I assume they also helped her with the content. Finally, at some point, I found myself wandering through a local park, not even in my future wife's own city, and there I found a small community paper on a bench. This is one of the few ads that she could afford at the time. For my part, the paper almost seemed to jump into my hands as I absent-mindedly swept it up. So then I opened the personals page and spotted her listing. This contained comments interesting to me, including one about being a shamanic woman. That certainly caught my attention. So I wrote to her and included a story about a past life a medium had made me aware of. I figured if that content scared her off, it was for the best. But to my surprise, she wrote me back and gave me her phone number. I made the call, and from the start, it was like returning home. We discovered much in common and talked many days, many hours on each call, never meeting in person or knowing what we looked like. I think we fell for each other during those calls. And finally, we met face to face. Incidentally, that past life write-up that I gave her was the Amber story that precedes this one in the series. Eventually, we acknowledged our feelings, moved in together, and soon married. Only after our marriage did we recognize and sum up all the other points that matched up between us that I just mentioned. It was an odd fact that I had not allowed myself a heavy tan for many years. Eventually, as a couple, she saw me in a tan and also learned about my repaired tooth. The comparison about many things as noted above all fit into our premonitions about each other. The only things that finally had come into play for us was the real personalities we discovered during our first conversations. The biggest surprise for my wife was finding out about my tooth after our wedding. Admittedly, there was finally plenty of synchronicity and serendipity involved in our story. Let me repeat that it was the specifics of personality and spirituality that put us together, as it should have been from the start. So my advice to people is to find your truth, stay loyal to that truth, and everything else will work out. For us, we probably did need to have 40 years of living before we had all the experience we needed to meet our own life plan expectations, and for us to have the skills to be a strong couple. In the end, we earned each other. Take my word for it. What was my own life plan intended to accomplish in this one corner of it? I think it meant to teach me how to make better decisions relative to all inputs, including those sourced from intuition, premonitions, and outside contributions. Very complex scenario, I agree, but there it is.